The Australian surf zone is not open water. From above, it looks alive, loud and chaotic. White water folding over itself, wind tearing the surface into glare and fragments, sand suspended in the shallows like smoke. From below, it is something else entirely. Light fractures as it hits the chop, collapsing into shimmering curtains that obscure depth and distort shape. Contrast is poor, edges blur, and objects at the surface are reduced to moving cutouts rather than detailed forms. This is not an accident of physics that predators merely tolerate. For the great white shark, the surf line is a screen, one of the most effective optical filters in the ocean, because it strips detail away and leaves only what matters: silhouette, motion, and timing. A white shark approaching the surf zone does not rush. It does not charge blindly through foam and noise. Its body language underwater is measured, almost restrained, using slow tail beats to minimize pressure waves and avoid announcing its presence. The shark holds depth just below the turbulence, where the water is darker and calmer, letting the surface chaos do the concealment work. From here, anything above becomes a black shape against a bright ceiling. Seal pups, juvenile sea lions, drifting debris, boards, and swimmers all compress into variations of the same visual problem. Edges dissolve, colors vanish. The surf line flattens identity. This is why the popular idea of a single pass attack is misleading. What looks like one decisive strike from above is often the final move in a longer evaluation sequence. White sharks scout. They arc, they circle wide and shallow, sometimes disappearing into deeper water only to re-enter from a different angle. These are not random movements. Each pass collects information: angle of approach, consistency of motion, acceleration patterns, and how the silhouette deforms as it moves through glare. A seal swimming with purpose produces a steady oscillation. A floating object drifts and yaws. A human paddling creates intermittent bursts of motion with pauses that can confuse classification. The shark is not counting limbs or reading faces. It is resolving a shape against noise, asking a simple evolutionary question: does this silhouette behave like prey? The surf line makes this question harder to answer, and that uncertainty is precisely what creates the strike window. In blue water, far from shore, prey is visible at distance. Details emerge earlier, and a misclassification can be corrected before commitment. Near the surface, in glare and chop, that luxury disappears. Once the silhouette crosses a threshold, once it fits the internal template of a pinniped profile, moving at the wrong speed, in the wrong place, with no escape vector, the decision locks. The shark does not need certainty. It needs probability high enough that hesitation becomes costly. A missed opportunity in the surf zone is rarely recoverable. Prey can reach rocks, kelp, or shallow refuges in seconds. Evolution favors commitment over caution in this narrow window. The mechanics of the strike reflect that logic. White sharks often approach from depth at a steep angle, using the surface as a visual blind. The upward trajectory is not just about surprise. It is about minimizing the time between recognition and contact. As the shark rises, its body accelerates, powered by massive red muscle mass, kept warm by countercurrent heat exchangers. This regional endothermy is not a trivia fact. It is what allows explosive bursts of speed in cold coastal waters where slower predators would lose power. The shark's eyes roll back at the last instant, a reflexive protection against thrashing prey, while the jaws open into a wide arc designed not for delicate bites, but for catastrophic contact. Importantly, the initial strike is often not meant to kill immediately. Against seals and sea lions, white sharks frequently employ a bite-and-release strategy, inflicting massive tissue damage and then backing off. In the surf zone, this serves two purposes. First, it reduces the risk of injury to the shark from claws and teeth during a prolonged struggle in shallow, obstacle-filled water. Second, it allows the predator to let physics finish the job. Blood loss, shock, and loss of coordination turn a powerful swimmer into a drifting silhouette, one that can be tracked and reclaimed with minimal risk. The surf that once concealed the approach now works against the prey, pushing it unpredictably while the shark follows beneath, guided by pressure changes and chemical cues rather than sight alone. Sensory integration is where the great white truly separates itself from myth. Vision initiates the encounter, but it is not the only system in play. As the shark closes distance, the lateral line detects minute vibrations, irregular paddling, panicked thrashing, or the rhythmic kick of flippers. Electroreception comes last, resolving muscle contractions at close range, confirming that the silhouette is alive. By the time these senses engage fully, the strike decision has already been made. The surf zone compresses the timeline, forcing earlier commitment and rewarding predators that can act decisively under uncertainty. From an ecological perspective, this hunting style shapes entire coastal systems. Pinniped colonies adjust haul-out sites and travel routes based on predation pressure, often favoring rocky shorelines or kelp forests, where silhouettes break apart and escape options multiply. Juvenile seals learn, through survival or loss, that surface lanes, predictable paths between feeding grounds and rest sites, are dangerous precisely because they create repeated silhouettes in the same visual corridor. Sharks, in turn, learn these lanes. Migration patterns align not just with temperature and prey abundance, but with geography that enhances silhouette reliability. Headlands, sandbars, and channels where animals must pass through glare-filled choke points. It is tempting to frame this interaction as a clash between predator and prey, but the reality is more subtle. The surf line is an interface where physics, biology, and behavior intersect. Light behaves differently here. Sound scatters. Water density shifts with sand and bubbles. Every adaptation, warm muscles, wide pectoral fins for lift, serrated teeth for tissue shearing, only matters because the environment creates moments where those traits can be expressed. Take the surf away, and the great white becomes just another large fish in open water, powerful but visible. Give it glare, chop, and a moving silhouette, and it becomes a specialist of the unseen approach. For humans, this is where misunderstanding begins. We imagine attacks as sudden, random events because we experience only the final second. We see the breach, the splash, the aftermath. What we do not see are the scouting arcs below, the angle checks, the moments where the shark passes close enough to evaluate but not commit. The ocean feels empty until it isn't, because the setup happens outside our sensory range. In blue water, you might spot a shadow at distance and adjust. In the surf zone, there is no warning phase visible from above. The screen works both ways. This is not a story of malice or intent. The great white is not targeting humans as prey in any meaningful evolutionary sense. Most interactions end in disengagement, precisely because the silhouette test fails at the last moment, or because the initial bite reveals unfamiliar texture and resistance. But the mechanism remains the same regardless of outcome. A shape moves through glare. It fits, briefly, into an ancient decision tree built for seals. The window opens. The shark commits. Whether the result is fatal, injurious, or merely terrifying depends on how quickly reality diverges from that initial read. Understanding this mechanism matters because it reframes risk. The danger is not shark-infested waters in a general sense. It is specific conditions, strong surface glare, broken water, predictable surface travel, and limited escape routes. These are environmental triggers, not behavioral flaws. They explain why incidents cluster in certain places and times, why early morning and late afternoon, when glare is strongest, carry higher risk, and why changes in prey populations can ripple outward into human shark encounters. In the end, the surf zone teaches a hard lesson about perception. The ocean does not announce its setups. It does not warn when probability crosses into action. The great white shark does not need to see the whole picture. It needs only a moment where the picture simplifies enough to act. In blue water, you might glimpse the approach and feel the tension build. In the surf, you miss the entire prelude. You don't see the decision form. You see the result because the screen was always doing its job. In open water, the manta ray looks untouchable. Its wings stretch wider than most small boats, sweeping through the sea with slow, effortless authority. Each stroke displaces tons of water, yet produces almost no turbulence. The animal does not appear to swim so much as translate, gliding forward on lift rather than thrust, converting momentum into distance with remarkable efficiency. In blue water, this design is close to perfect. Space is abundant, angles are wide, and threats can be seen and avoided long before they matter. But the ocean is not always wide, and when space compresses, the very traits that make mantas majestic become liabilities. Mantas are built for glide, not for agility. Their enormous pectoral fins act like wings, optimized for long, shallow angles of attack that maximize lift and minimize drag. This allows them to cruise for hours with minimal energy expenditure, filtering plankton from the water column as they go. Their bodies are dorsoventrally flattened, with rigid cartilage providing structural support across a broad span. What they lack, however, is the ability to pivot sharply. Tight turns require bending and rapid changes in fin orientation, movements that large, stiff wings resist. In open water, that resistance is irrelevant. In confined environments, it becomes dangerous. Along Australia's reefs and coastal channels, mantas regularly move into spaces that challenge their design. Cleaning stations, where small fish remove parasites and dead tissue, are often located near reefs or bommies where currents deliver nutrients and plankton. These areas attract multiple large animals at once: mantas, sharks, turtles, all converging in relatively tight corridors. Here, space is no longer an infinite buffer. It is a shared resource. Every body alters the flow, every movement changes the options available to everyone else. When a manta enters a narrow channel or reef-adjacent zone, its margin for error shrinks dramatically. A gentle bank that would be trivial in open water becomes a wide, sweeping arc that can carry the animal toward rock, coral, or other large bodies. Unlike many fish, mantas cannot fold their fins tightly against their bodies to slip through gaps. Their size is fixed in motion. To change direction, they must commit early, using gradual fin adjustments that take time and distance to complete. If that space disappears because of reef walls, strong cross currents, or the presence of other animals, the manta can find itself boxed. This is where risk accumulates. Getting boxed does not mean immediate death. It means losing control of angle and trajectory. A manta forced into a bad angle may brush coral, clip a fin on rock, or collide with another animal. Even minor damage matters. Tears along the fin edge disrupt lift and create drag, forcing the animal to expend more energy just to maintain glide. In a species that relies on efficiency to survive long migrations and seasonal feeding cycles, that extra cost compounds quickly. Crowding magnifies the problem. At popular cleaning stations, multiple mantas may queue, circling slowly as they wait their turn. The choreography looks calm, almost ceremonial, but it leaves little room for error. A sudden disturbance, a shark passing too close, a surge of current or human activity can force abrupt repositioning. Smaller, more agile animals can dart away. A manta cannot. Its response options are limited to banking, rising, or sinking, all of which require space. In a crowded setting, those options may already be occupied. Predators understand this vulnerability, even if they do not exploit it in the dramatic ways seen with more agile prey. Large sharks do not need to chase mantas relentlessly. They need only apply pressure at the wrong moment. A shark passing close along a reef edge can alter a manta's trajectory just enough to force it into a constrained path. Once constrained, the manta's ability to escape cleanly diminishes. While adult mantas are rarely killed outright, juveniles and injured individuals face significantly higher risk in these scenarios. The danger is not just biological, it is environmental. Human-made obstacles, mooring lines, nets, boat traffic, add artificial constraints to spaces that mantas already navigate carefully. A line stretched across a channel is trivial for a fish that can stop and reverse. For a manta, it is a trap. Entanglement incidents, even when non-lethal, often result in fin damage that permanently alters swimming efficiency. Again, size is the problem. There is no way to thread the needle when your body defines the width of the needle. Physiologically, mantas are adapted to endurance, not sudden exertion. Their muscles are tuned for sustained cruising, supported by a metabolic strategy that favors steady oxygen delivery over explosive bursts. They can accelerate when needed, but not without cost. In tight spaces, acceleration often worsens the situation, carrying the animal farther into danger rather than away from it. The manta's best defense, smooth, continuous glide, requires room to function. Take that room away, and the defense collapses. There is also a sensory dimension to this risk. Mantas rely heavily on vision and electroreception to navigate and locate plankton-rich waters. In clear blue water, their wide field of view provides ample warning of obstacles. Near reefs, visibility drops. Light scatters, shadows multiply, and depth perception becomes unreliable. Large animals like mantas cannot afford late corrections. By the time an obstacle is clearly visible, there may not be enough space to avoid it cleanly. Despite these risks, mantas continue to use crowded, complex habitats because the benefits are real. Cleaning stations reduce parasite load, improving health and swimming efficiency. Reef-adjacent currents concentrate food, making feeding more productive. The trade-off is constant: access versus safety. Evolution has not made mantas reckless. It has made them optimized for a world where space is usually available. When that assumption fails, so does the margin for error. The broader ecological lesson is uncomfortable but consistent. Size confers advantages: visibility, deterrence, thermal stability, but it also removes options. Smaller animals can exploit complexity, darting through tight spaces, hiding among structure. Large animals must manage complexity carefully, choosing when and where to enter it. The ocean does not reward dominance alone. It rewards fit between body and environment. For mantas, this fit is exquisite in the open sea and precarious near boundaries. Their presence near reefs is a reminder that even apex-adjacent species, animals with few natural predators, are still constrained by physics. Glide-based designs assume freedom of movement. Crowded water violates that assumption. To human observers, a manta ray drifting over a reef looks serene, almost invulnerable. The reality is more fragile. Every pass through a narrow channel, every approach to a busy cleaning station carries a calculation. Is there enough space to leave cleanly if something changes? Big does not mean safe. It means committed. Once a manta chooses a path, its ability to revise that choice is limited. That is the rule this chapter leaves behind. In the ocean, safety is not about power alone. It is about options. And the larger the body, the fewer options remain when space runs out. The ocean feels vast until it doesn't. From the surface, Australia's coastal waters look open and forgiving. Long horizons, rolling swell, and nothing that suggests boundaries. But to an orca pod, this space is already mapped. Currents become corridors. Reefs and drop-offs become walls. The water column itself becomes a three-dimensional arena where movement can be guided, restricted, and ultimately decided. Orcas do not chase prey until it collapses from exhaustion. That would be wasteful, risky, and unnecessary. Instead, they turn open water into a controlled environment, shaping outcomes through position rather than speed. An orca hunt often begins quietly, with no obvious sign of pursuit. The pod spreads out, individuals taking up stations that look casual to an untrained eye. Some remain near the surface, others sink lower, their dorsal fins slicing invisibly beneath the swell. This is not random spacing. Each animal is placing itself along potential escape routes, reading the water the way a human reads terrain. Orcas understand how prey will react long before it does. A seal group drifting near the edge of a reef, a pod of dolphins moving along a current seam, even large prey like baleen whales, all carry predictable responses to pressure. The orcas are not reacting in real time, they are setting conditions. This is why the idea of endless pursuit doesn't fit orca behavior. Chasing burns energy and increases the chance of error. Orcas evolved in cold, demanding environments where efficiency matters. Their bodies are built for power, but their brains are built for planning. Large brains, dense cortical folding, and complex social learning allow hunting strategies to be shared, refined, and passed down culturally. An orca pod in Australian waters does not operate as a collection of individuals improvising in the moment. It operates as a unit with memory, of places, of prey responses, of what works here and what fails. The first phase is control through herding. Pressure is applied not as a direct attack, but as a suggestion. One orca surfaces near the prey's flank, forcing a turn. Another appears deeper, cutting off a downward escape. A third positions itself up current, where swimming requires more effort. None of these moves require contact. They rely on the prey's own instincts, its urge to stay with the group, to avoid isolation, to flee toward what feels like open space. Each reaction is anticipated and gently redirected. Over time, the prey group compresses, bunching tighter as individuals try to maintain visual and acoustic contact with one another. This compression is not accidental. Groups provide confusion. A dense school of fish, a tight cluster of seals, or a coordinated pod of dolphins generates sensory noise. Echolocation returns overlap. Visual targets multiply. For most predators, this confusion is a problem. For orcas, it is something to be dismantled. The pod doesn't rush into the mass, it stretches it. By applying uneven pressure along the edges, they elongate the group, pulling it into a line or arc where individuals at the ends become more exposed. The goal is not panic, it is asymmetry. Isolation is the decisive moment, and it happens faster than most observers expect. A single seal hesitates, a dolphin misjudges a turn, a young whale lags behind its mother by a few body lengths. That gap is enough. Once separated, the animal loses the protection of collective movement. There is no longer a cloud of echoes to hide within, no neighboring bodies to mirror or mask its direction changes. Its signals, pressure waves, vocalizations, erratic swimming, become clear and trackable. The orcas respond instantly, closing in not with frenzy, but with precision. The speed of the finish is what makes isolation so lethal. An animal alone has no confusion shield. Every movement it makes is readable. Orcas exploit this by attacking from multiple angles, not necessarily to bite immediately, but to disrupt coordination. A tail slap can stun. A body bump can knock the wind or water from lungs not designed for sudden compression. In some documented hunts, orcas deliberately flip seals or dolphins, inducing a state known as tonic immobility, where the prey becomes temporarily paralyzed. This is not brute force. It is neurological exploitation learned through repeated success. In Australian waters, this logic plays out against a backdrop of diverse prey and complex habitats. Coastal orcas adapt their tactics to local conditions, using reefs, sandbars, and even waves as tools. One of the most striking examples of coordinated control is wave washing, where orcas generate artificial waves to sweep seals off ice floes or rocks. While famously observed in polar regions, the principle applies elsewhere. Manipulate the environment so the prey loses its footing, then exploit the moment of disorientation. The ocean, in these cases, becomes an extension of the pod's body. Underlying all of this is communication. Orcas are among the most acoustically sophisticated animals on the planet, using clicks for echolocation and calls for social coordination. During hunts, pods often reduce vocalization to avoid alerting prey, relying instead on learned positioning and subtle cues. When sound is used, it is targeted and purposeful. A low-frequency call can synchronize movement across distance, while rapid clicks refine spatial awareness at close range. These signals are not improvised. They are part of a shared hunting language developed over generations. Physiology supports this strategy at every level. Orcas possess exceptional oxygen management, allowing them to make repeated deep dives without fatigue. Their muscles are rich in myoglobin, storing oxygen and sustaining power during extended underwater maneuvering. Thermoregulation, maintained by a thick blubber layer and countercurrent heat exchange, ensures muscle efficiency even in cooler currents sweeping along Australia's southern coast. None of these traits exist in isolation. They form a system optimized not for sprinting endlessly, but for controlling encounters until success becomes inevitable. What makes this hunting style unsettling to human observers is not the violence. It is the structure. There is a sense that events are unfolding according to a plan that existed before the prey arrived. When people describe orca hunts as intelligent or strategic, they are responding to this feeling of inevitability. The prey is not outrun, it is outthought. Every attempted escape feeds more information into a system already designed to close gaps. The ocean, which feels open and neutral to us, becomes something curated and intentional. Ecologically, this has far-reaching consequences. Prey species alter migration routes, timing, and group composition in response to orca pressure. Dolphins may favor shallower waters or tighter formations. Seals adjust haul-out patterns and foraging windows. Even large whales show behavioral changes, clustering defensively or modifying vocal behavior when orcas are present. These shifts ripple through food webs, affecting everything from fish populations to nutrient cycling along the coast. Orcas, as apex predators, are not just hunters. They are architects of behavior across entire ecosystems. There is also a cultural dimension within orca populations themselves. Different pods specialize in different prey, and these preferences are learned, not genetically fixed. A pod that hunts seals uses different techniques than one that targets fish or large whales. In Australian waters, where prey diversity is high, this flexibility is a survival advantage. Young orcas learn by observation, gradually participating in hunts as their coordination improves. Mistakes are corrected, successful tactics reinforced. Over time, the pod becomes more than the sum of its members. It becomes a repository of collective knowledge. For humans sharing these waters, the lesson is subtle but important. Risk does not come from randomness. It comes from predictability. Animals that move along habitual routes, linger in transitional zones, or rely on group cohesion without accounting for intelligent predators are more vulnerable. Orcas rarely pose a direct threat to humans in the wild, but their presence reshapes how other animals behave, which in turn reshapes the environment humans experience. A coastline with orcas is a coastline where nothing moves without being noticed. The unsettling truth is not that orcas are violent. It is that they make the ocean feel deliberate. When a hunt unfolds, it carries the impression that every position was chosen, every reaction anticipated. The prey is not overwhelmed by chaos. It is guided into clarity, stripped of options, until only one outcome remains. In that moment, the vastness of the sea collapses into a narrow corridor of control. And that is the final perspective this chapter leaves behind. In the presence of coordinated predators, space alone offers no safety. Open water does not mean freedom. It means exposure. The orca pod does not need to dominate the entire ocean. It only needs to understand how animals move within it, and once it does, the water itself becomes part of the hunt. Along Australia's eastern and western migration corridors, humpback whales move like living continents. Adults carry 40 tons of muscle and blubber, their pectoral fins stretching longer than a small car, their tails capable of accelerating entire bodies through water with single, decisive strokes. Few animals in the ocean can challenge that kind of power directly. Yet every year, these giants travel with a liability pressed close to their flanks, calves that are still learning how to exist in water, measured not in meters, but in momentum. The contrast between adult dominance and juvenile limitation defines everything about humpback vulnerability. It is not the strength of the mother that decides the outcome. It is the weakest swimmer in the group. A newborn humpback calf enters the ocean unfinished. Its muscles are soft, its coordination imperfect, its oxygen management still developing. To survive, it must surface frequently, draft alongside its mother to conserve energy, and rely on her positioning to reduce drag. This dependency is not subtle. A mother and calf pair moves differently from a solitary adult. Their pace is slower. Their path is more linear. Their surfacing rhythm is constrained by the calf's lungs rather than the mother's capacity. To a predator that hunts patterns rather than individuals, this difference is unmistakable. Adult humpbacks can sprint when needed. They can dive deep, change direction, and sustain long periods without surfacing. Calves cannot. They tire quickly, struggle in rough seas, and lose efficiency when forced into repeated accelerations. This asymmetry creates the opening hunters exploit. The strategy is never to overpower the adult outright. It is to apply pressure in ways that magnify the calf's limitations until the mother's strength is no longer enough to compensate. Protection behaviors reveal how seriously humpbacks take this threat. Mothers place themselves between the calf and any approaching danger, using their massive bodies as mobile shields. They position calves above their backs or tucked near the pectoral fins, where turbulence is reduced and visual access is limited. Some mothers adopt tight circular swimming patterns, forcing threats to approach from predictable angles. Others move into shallower water, where maneuverability for large predators is reduced. These behaviors are not instinctual reflexes alone. They are learned responses refined over generations of survival. Despite this, pressure works, because pressure is cumulative. Predators like orcas do not need a single decisive strike. They apply stress over time, testing reactions, probing weaknesses, and forcing movement. Each forced turn costs energy. Each acceleration taxes the calf's developing muscles. Each extended surface interval increases exposure. The goal is not immediate separation. It is erosion. When pressure increases, mistakes follow. A calf lags slightly during a turn. The mother adjusts position, exposing a flank. A wave disrupts drafting, forcing the calf to swim independently for a few seconds too long. These moments are small, almost invisible in isolation. Together, they create openings. Separation does not have to be complete to be lethal. A few body lengths are enough to break the protective geometry that keeps the calf safe. The ocean itself becomes part of the problem. Migration routes pass through constricted spaces, headlands, shelf edges, current seams, where movement options narrow. In open water, a mother can choose direction freely, using space as defense. In tighter corridors, that freedom disappears. Predators can use geography to apply leverage, herding the pair toward less favorable water or exploiting currents that sap speed. What looks like a straight migration line from the surface is, underwater, a series of forced choices. Physiology deepens the vulnerability. Calves lack the thick blubber layer that insulates adults and stabilizes buoyancy. Cold water drains energy faster. Rough conditions amplify fatigue. Even the calf's breathing pattern is a liability. Frequent surfacing creates predictable timing, making it easier for hunters to synchronize approaches. The mother may be capable of holding her breath and diving deep, but she cannot do so if the calf needs air. Power is irrelevant if it cannot be used without abandoning the vulnerable. Social dynamics complicate the picture further. Other adult humpbacks sometimes intervene. especially in areas with high predation pressure. There are documented cases of unrelated adults positioning themselves near calves, harassing predators, or creating physical barriers. These interventions are extraordinary, but they are not guaranteed. They depend on proximity, timing, and the willingness of other whales to incur risk. Even with help, sustained pressure can overwhelm the group's ability to maintain cohesion. From an ecological standpoint, this interaction shapes migration timing and routes. Mothers with calves often travel closer to shore, where shallow water can deter deep-diving predators. They may pause migration during adverse conditions, waiting for calmer seas that reduce calf fatigue. These choices ripple outward, affecting energy budgets, arrival times at feeding grounds, and overall reproductive success. The cost of protection is paid not only in moments of danger, but in long-term survival trade-offs. The uncomfortable reality is that strength does not scale cleanly. A 40-ton body cannot simply drag a 1-ton calf indefinitely without consequence. Hydrodynamics do not care about maternal intent. Drag increases. Efficiency drops. Fatigue accumulates. Predators exploit these physical truths rather than challenging raw power. The hunt becomes a test of endurance and coordination, not force. To human observers, it can be shocking to see such massive animals under threat. The expectation is that size confers safety. In many cases, it does. Adult humpbacks are rarely killed outright. But the ocean does not judge groups by their strongest member. It judges them by their slowest. That is why calves are the focus, and why pressure tactics are so effective. Remove the calf, and the migration ends in failure, regardless of how powerful the adult remains. There is a grim elegance to this strategy. Predators do not fight giants head-on. They rearrange the board. They turn time, space, and fatigue into weapons. Each move forces a response. Each response narrows options. Over hours, sometimes days, the balance shifts. The adult is still strong. The calf is still alive. But the margin has vanished. Even when calves survive, the experience leaves marks. Prolonged pressure increases stress hormones, affects feeding efficiency, and can delay migration. These effects accumulate across populations, influencing birth intervals and calf survival rates year after year. Power protects individuals. Pressure shapes populations. The final lesson of the humpback story is not about cruelty or inevitability. It is about systems. The ocean does not reward absolute strength. It rewards the ability to function under constraint. A lone adult humpback is a fortress. A mother and calf are a moving compromise between speed, safety, and necessity. Predators understand that compromise intimately, and so the chapter closes on its finishing truth. Even giants lose when the ocean turns into a chessboard. Not because they are weak, but because every piece moves differently, and the game is decided by who controls the space between them. Along Australia's southern coastline, fur seal colonies sit at the boundary between safety and exposure. From above, the rocks look crowded and chaotic, bodies draped over one another, heads lifted, flippers twitching, a constant churn of sound and movement. From below the surface, the scene resolves into something more legible. Each seal becomes a moving shape, defined less by form than by how it disturbs the water around it. Splashes, bubble trails, ripples, and abrupt turns carve signatures into the sea. To a predator watching from depth, these signatures matter far more than expressions of play or curiosity. Motion is information, and not all motion is equal. Australian fur seals are famously energetic in the water. They spin, twist, roll, and breach in ways that look exuberant, almost carefree. Pups and juveniles in particular seem to treat the nearshore zone as a playground, darting between rocks, porpoising at the surface, and chasing one another through foam lines. To human observers, this behavior reads as joy or practice, a rehearsal of adult agility. To predators, it reads very differently. Fast spins, surface pops, and erratic bursts of speed match the same movement profiles generated by injured fish or panicked prey. The difference between play and distress is not emotional. It is mechanical. And mechanically, playful seals leak energy in ways that are hard to ignore. Every movement an animal makes in water produces a cascade of signals. A clean, efficient stroke leaves a narrow wake and minimal turbulence. An inefficient or exaggerated movement sheds vortices, bubbles, and pressure waves that travel outward and downward. Fur seals, built for maneuverability rather than pure efficiency, are naturally noisy swimmers. Their large foreflippers generate powerful thrust, but also create complex turbulence, especially during sharp turns or vertical lunges. When a seal spins rapidly or bursts to the surface, it injects air into the water column, leaving a trail of bubbles that can persist for seconds. These bubbles are not visual decoration. They are high-contrast markers that hang in the water, tracing the seal's recent path like chalk on a blackboard. Predators do not need to see the seal itself to read these trails. Sharks and orcas are exquisitely sensitive to pressure changes and turbulence. A twisting seal creates a three-dimensional map of motion that lingers long after the body has passed. Direction changes amplify this effect. Each abrupt turn sheds energy sideways, producing asymmetrical wakes that reveal not only where the seal is, but where it is likely to go next. In this sense, playful movement is not random chaos. It is predictable chaos, rich with cues that experienced predators know how to interpret. Juveniles are especially vulnerable because they have not yet learned pattern discipline. Adult fur seals, particularly experienced females, move with restraint when traveling between feeding grounds and haul-out sites. Their strokes are smoother, their trajectories more direct. They minimize surface time and avoid unnecessary splashing in open water. Juveniles, by contrast, experiment. They stop and start. They reverse direction abruptly. They breach for no functional reason other than momentum or curiosity. Each of these actions increases signal strength. Each one makes the seal easier to track. There is also a social component to this vulnerability. Juveniles often swim in loose groups, loosely coordinated but not synchronized. From a predator's perspective, this creates multiple overlapping wakes that are easier to separate than a tight, disciplined formation. The individual that breaks rhythm, lingers near the surface, spins too sharply, or drifts slightly out of alignment, stands out immediately. Confusion, which protects prey in dense schools of fish, does not function the same way here. The seals are too large, their movements too distinct. Instead of masking individuals, group play highlights deviations. Physiology adds another layer. Fur seals are superb divers, capable of long foraging trips and deep dives thanks to high blood volume, elevated myoglobin levels, and efficient oxygen management. But near the surface, especially during play, these advantages are irrelevant. Buoyancy increases, reducing control. Lung volume rises, making rapid depth changes more energetically costly. Play tends to happen in exactly the zone where seals are least able to disappear quickly. A seal popping repeatedly at the surface advertises its position to any predator patrolling below the thermocline, where light fades and silhouettes sharpen. Predators learn this quickly. White sharks, which hunt fur seals extensively along Australia's southern coast, do not need to identify individual animals. They learn movement categories. A steady, purposeful transit is low probability. Erratic, splash-heavy motion in a predictable corridor between colony and feeding grounds is high probability. Orcas, when present, read the same cues at a different scale, using group movement patterns to anticipate isolation opportunities. In both cases, the seal's own behavior initiates the interaction, not because it is wrong, but because it is readable. This does not mean play is a mistake. Play has real biological value. For juveniles, it builds muscle coordination, spatial awareness, and social bonds. It helps them learn how water responds to their bodies, how quickly they can turn, how far they can lunge. Over time, this learning produces the controlled movement of adults. The cost of that learning, however, is exposure. Evolution tolerates this risk because the long-term payoff, competent, agile adults, outweighs the short-term losses. Predators, in turn, exploit the window where learning is incomplete. The nearshore environment amplifies this dynamic. Shallow water reflects sound and pressure waves, trapping energy between surface and seabed. Rock walls, kelp forests, and reef edges create acoustic clutter that paradoxically makes strong signals stand out more clearly. A juvenile seal spinning near a rock face generates echoes and reverberations that can be detected from surprising distances. The environment acts as a signal amplifier, turning playful motion into an announcement. There is a subtle irony here. The same agility that allows fur seals to evade predators in complex terrain is what draws attention in the first place. Rapid turns and vertical movement are excellent escape tools once a chase begins. But before a chase exists, those movements function as beacons. Predators are drawn not to stillness, but to activity that suggests opportunity. A seal gliding quietly is easy to ignore. A seal exploding into foam is not. As fur seals mature, their behavior changes. They learn when to move efficiently and when to indulge in excess. Play becomes more localized, confined to shallow, cluttered areas where predators are less effective, or to moments when many seals are present and risk is diluted. Travel becomes quieter, more linear. This transition is not taught explicitly. It emerges from survival pressure. Individuals that fail to moderate their movement patterns simply do not persist long enough to refine them. For humans watching from shore, it is tempting to romanticize seal play as carefree innocence. In reality, it is a phase negotiated under constant risk. The ocean does not distinguish between joy and vulnerability. It responds only to energy, motion, and pattern. Predators do not need seals to be weak. They need them to be readable. Play, in this context, is not safety. It is visibility. The deeper lesson extends beyond fur seals. Across marine ecosystems, predators are tuned to predictable chaos. They are drawn to movement that looks uncontrolled but follows repeatable rules. Erratic swimming within known corridors, surface activity at consistent times, group behavior without synchronization. These patterns create opportunity. The animals that survive are not necessarily the fastest or strongest, but the ones that learn when to quiet their signatures. In Australian waters, fur seals exist at the intersection of abundance and attention. Their colonies are productive, their populations resilient, but their daily movements generate constant data for predators to pass. Juveniles pay the highest price because they broadcast the most information. Over time, the survivors refine their signals, leaking less energy into the water, blending motion with environment rather than standing apart from it. That is the uncomfortable truth beneath the spectacle. The ocean does not punish play out of cruelty. It simply rewards predators that know how to read it. And in a world where movement is information, the line between joy and danger is thinner than it looks. In Australia's shallow coastal waters, the dugong moves through the sea like a relic of an earlier rhythm. There is no rush in its body, no sudden acceleration, no sharp pivots or bursts of urgency. Its bulk drifts low over the sea floor, lips brushing through seagrass meadows with slow, deliberate sweeps. Every movement seems economical, measured, almost timeless. This is not an animal built for reaction. It is an animal built for repetition. And in an ocean ruled by opportunists, repetition is a signal. Dugongs live by routine because their food demands it. Seagrass is abundant but low in calories, forcing the animal into long feeding sessions just to meet basic metabolic needs. To make this viable, dugongs minimize energy expenditure wherever possible. They follow established feeding lanes across meadows, returning to the same patches repeatedly as grasses regenerate. Their travel paths become etched into the ecosystem, not as physical tracks, but as behavioral ones, predictable corridors of slow movement between feeding and breathing zones. Over time, these paths stabilize into habits, and habits create schedules. Breathing is the second fixed point in this pattern. Dugongs are mammals, tethered to the surface by the need for air. But unlike agile swimmers, they cannot vary their surfacing dramatically. Their lungs are large, their bodies heavy, and their buoyancy carefully balanced. When they surface, it is not explosive. It is gradual. A dugong rises at an angle, nostrils breaking the surface briefly before sinking back down along nearly the same trajectory. The interval between breaths is steady, shaped by physiology rather than choice. This regularity is efficient, but it is also readable. To predators, this combination of fixed feeding lanes and steady air cycles creates what can only be described as a timetable. No chase is required. No prolonged pursuit. Hunters do not need to exhaust the dugong. Its slow pace already limits escape options. Instead, they learn. They observe where the animal feeds, how long it stays submerged, and where it surfaces. Over repeated encounters, the randomness disappears. The dugong does not need to be watched continuously. It only needs to be checked at the right moments. This is the essence of schedule predation. Unlike ambush or pursuit, which rely on surprise or speed, schedule predation relies on patience and memory. The predator positions itself along a known route or beneath a known surfacing point and waits. The prey arrives not because it is chased, but because it always does. The ocean, vast as it seems, shrinks around these routines until time itself becomes the trap. In Australian waters, this vulnerability historically aligned with apex predators such as large sharks, and in earlier ecological eras, orcas. Adult dugongs are large and powerful enough that outright predation is rare, but juveniles and calves are not. Young dugongs must surface more frequently, move less efficiently, and remain close to their mothers. Their smaller bodies leak more information: bubbles, disturbed sediment, shallow movement, and their breathing cycles are shorter and more obvious. For a predator attuned to repetition, these cues are enough. The danger is not only from predators with teeth. Human activity overlays the same predictable patterns. Boat traffic learns where dugongs surface. Fishing pressure concentrates along the same shallow channels and seagrass edges. Net placement and propeller strikes follow the same logic as natural predators. Wait where the dugong will be, not where it might be. The animal's inability to change pace or routine quickly turns coexistence into conflict. Physiologically, dugongs are locked into this slow rhythm. Their metabolic rate is low, their muscles adapted for sustained movement rather than bursts. Their bones are dense, an adaptation that helps them stay submerged while grazing, but that density increases inertia. Quick turns and rapid accelerations are not just difficult, they are energetically expensive to the point of impracticality. A dugong cannot simply decide to be unpredictable. Its body resists that option. Thermoregulation reinforces this constraint. Dugongs are sensitive to cold and rely on warm, shallow waters to maintain body temperature. Seasonal movements follow temperature gradients, further tightening their schedules. In winter, they cluster in known warm refuges. In summer, they expand feeding ranges but still return to familiar lanes. Each seasonal shift adds another layer of predictability, another pattern that can be learned by anything paying attention. There is a tragic efficiency to this system. Dugongs are not careless. Their routines evolved in ecosystems where threats were relatively stable and sparse. For much of their evolutionary history, there was no advantage to erratic behavior. Consistency conserved energy and maximized feeding success. The problem arises when the environment changes faster than the animal can. New predators, new obstacles, and new human pressures exploit patterns that were once safe. From a camera's perspective, a dugong surfacing looks peaceful. The water barely breaks. There is no splash, no panic, just a slow inhale and a return to grazing. What the camera does not show is the timeline beneath that moment, the hours of feeding that led to it, the repeated passes through the same corridor, the certainty that this surfacing was coming. To a hunter operating on memory, this moment was never a surprise. Ecologically, dugongs play a critical role as gardeners of seagrass meadows. Their grazing stimulates growth, prevents overgrowth, and maintains healthy, productive habitats for countless other species. Their slow pace is not a flaw. It is part of a system that keeps coastal ecosystems functioning. But that same pace limits adaptability. When pressure increases, dugongs cannot simply shift strategies. They can only endure or decline. The contrast with more agile marine mammals is stark. Dolphins alter routes daily. Seals vary surfacing patterns and feeding times. Even large whales, despite their size, can change depth and timing dramatically. Dugongs cannot. Their survival strategy is not flexibility. It is stability. And stability only works when the environment allows it. The ocean, however, is not sentimental. It does not protect animals because they are gentle or ancient. It responds to mechanics. A slow animal with fixed routines becomes a predictable event in space and time. Predators that recognize this do not need to be fast. They need to be consistent. The hunt becomes an appointment rather than a chase. This is the uncomfortable truth at the heart of the dugong story. Its vulnerability is not weakness in the traditional sense. It is commitment, to a way of life that assumes tomorrow will look like today. When that assumption fails, the dugong has no lever to pull, no sudden tactic to deploy. It cannot compress time or change pace enough to escape attention. And so the chapter closes on a rule that applies far beyond dugongs. In the ocean, danger does not always come from speed or aggression. Sometimes it comes from clocks. Animals that cannot change their rhythm become part of someone else's schedule. The sea rewards those who can vary, surprise, and adapt. It punishes those who must repeat. For the dugong, the slow rise to the surface is not just a breath. It is a promise kept again and again to an environment that has learned to listen.